What's up, guys? Welcome back. Bunkbed breakdowns. It's just me and Noah here, and we're here to answer your Q and A's. We said we're going to do this bi-weekly, so you guys have posted some questions in the Discord. Just want to take a chance to go through and make sure we address some of those. So, without further ado, do we have an intro for the show?
No, last time I just put up a screen that said like no intro or something, and people like this, so we might just keep that.
All right, man. We're gonna hit up with the no intro.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Um, so first up, I think we're going to cover this topic. It's something that popped up in one of the YouTube comments from last week's narrative. I would address in the narrative, but I said it. I figured it'd probably be better off addressing the Q&A. And is what to do in your leagues to address COVID. And we'll kind of talk about this first of all from a dynasty perspective. Maybe we'll brush on redraft a little bit, but I think there's a lot of issues here, right? One, the most glaring one is like how many games will we played, right? So what I'm doing in some of my leagues, and Noah, feel free to jump in here. But I'm basically segregating games played into different buckets. So if it's 5 games or less, 7 games or less, that's like one bucket. If it's 7 to 12 games, as in, you play out the regular season, but there's no playoffs, that's another bucket. And then if you play into the playoffs, but you don't finish all the games, then that's like the third bucket. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about going through these things. And if it's 7 games or less, to me, that's not really a full season. So I'm not really doing payouts for that at least. But what I do you want to use that for is determining draft order, because if you play up to 7 games, I think that's a better indication of your team's success and your team's strength than 2019, because you would have made draft picks, you would have made trades, et cetera, right? And then if you're in that next bucket of like 7 to 12 games, that's when I feel like you should probably pay out the season, because you've played like a decent amount, right? Like, I mean, if you're better than someone for 12 weeks of the year, I think you deserve that championship. And the reason why is because we always talk about playoffs being luck and regular season being skill. That's kind of like, the optimal, portrayal of that. And I would say that in order to determine the leader, because you don't have like rankings, or you necessarily haven't played out like a full season, I would use total points scored. Because that kind of shows who the best is in that season. And then my final bucket of like you make it into the playoffs, but you don't go all the way, what I would say is the people that are in the playoffs, and I'm still thinking through this, but I think what I'm going to do is split the money evenly for people that are in the playoffs, or do some sort of weighted, what do you call it? Weighted ranking system. But I'm like kind of leaning against that, because in the playoffs, like anything can happen, right? Just because you're a 1 seed doesn't mean you're going to win all the way. So I feel like making it to the playoffs is the big leap. And then from there, I think it's going to be about, splitting it evenly from there. And then obviously, if you have a draft order, that's like the next big issue that I've seen people trying to deal with on the COVID side. And like, I think if you play 5 games, even, that's what I'm going with. If you play 5 games or more, like that's going to determine the draft order. And if you play less than 5 games, what I would do is do a lottery system where it's like weighted. So don't just go by 2019 record by itself, because that's kind of like double dipping on tanking a season in 2019. What I would do is like Curtis Patrick, C Patrick FF or C Patrick NFL on
It's
Twitter,
NFL.
basically tweet about these rules where like basically you assign people more chances of drawing the ball based on how many losses they have. So the baseline is like 6 losses, right? And if you have like 9 losses, you get 3 more than the person who has like 5, and so on and so on. So I would do some sort of weighted lottery to like iron out the draft order for 2021 if there's less than 5 games played. But that's kind of how I thought about it. I figured I'd put that out there. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Noah.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I haven't really thought about it too much, just because in the back of my head, I just don't see how there isn't like maybe there isn't a full season, but I don't see how they don't play like 10 games at least, even if it is postponed a little bit, because we've seen basically every sport to this point come back. And sure, football is more of a contact sport and you're up close and personal, but these teams have way too much money. They're gonna be like testing these players day in and day out. And even if that means if your star players miss a few games, like extend the roster spots. In Dynasty, you probably don't need to because you probably already have like 30 roster spots. But I really haven't thought about it too much. But I do like what you said, Mike, where like the 3 buckets. And I agree, like 7 weeks in, you get a gauge of like who has a good team. And those teams that were tanking 7 weeks in are going to be like 0-7 or 1-6. So at that point, it wouldn't be unfair if they do get the number 1 overall pick, because you're seeing their tanking strategy come to fruition. And you're seeing these win now teams being like 6-1, 7-0, and they're going to be in the back of the order, which would have happened probably if the full season played out. So I like thinking of it that way, because right now I think the biggest concern isn't even like what's going to happen this season. is what's going to happen in the 2021 rookie draft, because if you don't know how to determine a draft order by that time, the teams that were tanking and invested heavily in the 2021 class, like I think Bailey in the Filet of the Public League probably has like 15 of the top 24 picks and like 8 of the
Yeah.
top 12. If he somehow gets screwed by random chance and misses 4 top 12 picks, 4 of the top 12 first round picks, just because a season didn't play out, that's going to be pretty dicey. And I wouldn't be surprised if people just like drop out of your league because of that. So I'm still remaining hopeful. I'm remaining positive. I do think that there will be a season. There will be enough of a sample for you to draw a rookie draft order. But I do like a lot of what you said, Mike, and a lot of what Curtis Patrick said. And I'm sure if this does happen and the NFL season is fully canceled, there will be like plenty of people on Twitter, and we will direct you guys to them so you guys can figure out what you can do with your dynasty league so it doesn't completely fold on itself if the NFL season does not play out this year.
Yeah, one other thing I will add is I think, beneficial to your league is you should do something with the IR. So whether the NFL has basically come out and said, and there will be like an IR designation for COVID. So I think there's a couple ways you can deal with it. One is just expand your IR from like whatever it is, 2 to 3 by like 4 or 5 spots, because you're going to see players going in and out of COVID. It's just unavoidable. Or alternatively, if you don't want to deal with like that type of management, you could just expand your rosters. Like you could literally just expand your roster by like 4 for the season or something like that. Take out the IRs completely even and just expand your roster size by like 5 to 6. I think that's a pretty easy way to deal with it and a very low maintenance, because like I see a lot of solutions of like, hey, like, you'll have like a IR designation or like an out designation, but like you can only put COVID in there, and then it's like the commissioner to like literally check every single roster to make sure no one's like abusing or doing it on purpose. I think it's just a lot of work. It's just easier to just handle that as like a uniform decision as possible.
What do you think about? I know Max the Animal has brought it up on Fade the Public a few times. Like you draft a quarterback, it's for redraft mainly. You draft a quarterback, you automatically get the backup. So if you draft Baker Mayfield, you get Case Keenum. If you draft Drew Brees, you get Jameis Winston. What do you think about that?
I think that's okay too. Although I don't like I just don't like someone getting like 2 players with 1
Mm-hmm.
pick. Like that idea is like really weird to me. I think if you're like, everyone knows COVID's there, right? Everyone knows that the risk of someone sitting out is there. So that should play into your strategy. That should play into how you draft. Like you should be accounting for these things, because it's not like it's unfair to not let someone draft a backup, because like what if I want to draft a backup? Like someone else in
Yeah,
one of my
like
leagues
torn
brought up.
ACLs happen every year too. That doesn't mean you get
Yeah.
Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, right? You take
Yeah,
Alvin Kamara and
exactly.
you reach on Latavius Murray because there is that risk of it happening.
Yeah, I would say a better solution is you get to play. You get to, if you draft them both, you get to start the quarterback position for that team. So
Mm.
like you would get to start Drew Brees or Jameis Winston, whoever scores the most or total of their points for any game. But you don't get to just draft one player with 2 picks. I think that's a little bit too weird to me. Yeah. So we got a question here from Maz Windu. I think this guy was also one of the first comments on the video. So shout out to him. He beat out someone to get there. I like the commitment. He's asking, are we believing that McVay will actually go with an RB committee, even though he hasn't in the past? Or is it just coach speak and he'll do what he's always done? Featured back. Look, I think this is what I'm going to say about this. If you believe that Cam Akers is going to be part of a committee for the entire season, I got some snake oil to sell you. That's all I can say, because like when we've seen this before, like coaches speaking well of their veterans who they literally just drafted a replacement for is not news, because you don't want to lose your locker room by coming out and say, yeah, hey, Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown, like you're just basically like a sack of potatoes on the team now because you drafted Cam Akers. I'm not going to say that, right? You still want a team, like you still want support from your veterans. You still need the veterans there. But I think that they'll have a role. Almost definitely they'll have a role to start the season, but I just don't see a world where it becomes like this like 40-40-20 or like 50-30-20 like split that people keep talking about or overreacting to. I think it's a lot of coach speak, and McVay is a smart guy, right? Like he's someone who knows that you don't want to lose the locker room, so he's not going to say it. I think like that's just so obvious. It's such an obvious thing. Like I don't really pay attention to that both ways at this early in the season.
Yeah, actions just speak a lot louder than words. As cliche as that may sound, like the narrative last offseason was Todd Gurley was going to get his workload scaled back because he had an incredible 2018, but he fell apart towards the end of the season. He wasn't used heavily in the playoffs. Like CJ Anderson was basically their RB1 down the stretch because of his degenerative knee issue. And people were saying, oh, Todd Gurley might not be the guy. Draft Malcolm Brown. They just drafted Darrell Henderson in the second round. It is going to be a committee. Guess what we saw last year? We saw Todd Gurley be one of the very few workhorses again in the NFL. You draft Cam Akers in the second round when you have more holes in your offense than the city of LA has holes on every street corner. And you expect him to be in a committee. He has the all-around skill set. He can pass block despite people saying he can't. Like, we threw up that Twitter clip of him just like absolutely annihilating 300-pound men, just running at him straight in the face. Like, sure, he's raw, but he's better at this point, in my opinion, than what Darrell Henderson is. Like, Darrell Henderson said he isn't a good fit for that offense. And I don't know about you, Mike, but like, if you get a brand new job and you're starting out week 1 and they give you a task and you're like, I kind of stink at this. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be good. Like, I don't think your employer is going to be like, oh, we kind of believe in you. You don't believe in yourself, but we'll believe in you. Like, that just instinctually, logically does not make sense. Cam Akers is an absolute savage. One of the things that we loved about him this offseason was the fact that he didn't throw anybody under the bus when he was being asked at the combine, like, why he struggled. He's like, it was kind of a tough situation. We played good teams. Like, no, just come out and say your team was absolute garbage and you did the best you could. So he's somebody who's overcome many obstacles in his career. And I think jumping over Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson in the depth chart is one of these smaller obstacles he will have to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the pass pro is a cool one because, like, Darrell Henderson is not pass protecting anyone. That dude is tiny. So look, I think this is all coach speak. Maybe early on we'll see some of that, but like, if anyone is actually believing this, and after the first 2 weeks, like, he doesn't get workhorse volume right away, I would pounce on that. I would pounce on that value because, like I said, I think he's a dark horse for the top RB of this class.
Yep, definitely. And then we have a question from Grat 2001. That's crazy that people are born after the year 2000. He asked, do you think it's necessary to have at least 3 quarterbacks that will for sure start this year, or could you get away with 2 in Superflex Dynasty 12 team? With COVID happening and just being in a Superflex league, like Superflex leagues in general, I never feel comfortable with just having 2, despite like most of my rosters having 2. I'm just not a comfortable guy most of the time. But the fact that COVID is happening and you only have 2, if you have like an older quarterback or like an injury susceptible quarterback, like, I know people are fading Mark Andrews because he has like diabetes. I'm not sure like exactly every single quarterback's diagnosis, but if you have somebody that is more like prone to getting the disease and he's one of your 2 quarterbacks, then that's definitely a scary thing to see. But I think overall, and you'll agree with this too, Mike, like, if you're in a 12-team league and you only have 2 quarterbacks, it's very, very hard to compete because there's like 2 weeks a season. You're basically dropping a game if you're playing somebody that has 2 starters because you're going to have 2 guys on bye.
Yeah, look, I think it's a very risky proposition to have just 2 quarterbacks because if you lose one of them, I mean, you're almost certainly derailing your entire season, or you're overpaying because everyone knows the exact situation you're in, right? Like, that's the problem, is like, you're gonna have to overpay to get one if one goes down. But it's important to like consider like what quarterbacks you have, right? Like, I have a league where I have Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott as my quarterback, so like, there are very few weeks where I'm going to bench one of them for anyone else. So I don't want to invest too much into that 3rd quarterback position. So, what I have is a Justin Herbert because I picked him up in the draft. So is Justin Herbert going to start this year? I have no idea. So he might not be a starter, but I still like to have someone there, on the just in case off chance that I do lose one of my starters and it totally derails my season. But if you're in a situation where, in most of my leagues where I don't go early quarterback, maybe you have like a Jared Goff and like a Matthew Stafford and like a Ryan Tannehill, like 3 of the quarterbacks in that 12 to like 20 bunch. I think that's probably the optimal path because then you can kind of play a little bit of the streaming game, and streaming quarterbacks in season is actually pretty damn easy. As much as all these like people on Twitter in the past few weeks telling me they're waiver wire wizards and they win leagues by playing the waiver wire and streaming, I think that's pretty table stakes, and honestly, it's pretty damn easy to do. And if you struggle with it, just follow me on Twitter. I put out like QB streams every week during the season. But yeah, I think that's like where you can kind of get a little bit of that streaming benefit, is when you have like quarterbacks in that mid to low range.
Yep. And I think to wrap this episode up, we have D Patel 35, and he asks, he just says, both Noah and Mike, how many dynasty leagues are you guys in? How many titles have you guys won in those leagues? And then possibly show your rosters of the best and worst team you have. Mike, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm literally the Los Angeles Chargers in real life too, because I have not won any type of dynasty league. I think I'm in like 8 or 9 of them, and I joined the majority of them this offseason, so I haven't had the chance to lose in them yet. But me being confident in my dynasty teams, it looks good because on paper they look solid. But when the playoffs roll around, anything can happen. Last year, I was up like 25 with like 2 minutes left in the 1 o'clock games or the 4 o'clock games. And the guy had Todd Gurley, he had Julio Jones, Matt Ryan. Literally all 3 of them scored a touchdown at the same exact time. They hit like some sort of bonuses, and I lost by like 2 points. So I got a bad stroke of luck there. That was probably the closest I will ever be to winning a championship. And that probably is my best team. And I'll throw it up on the screen right now. I have Kyler Murray and Josh Allen at quarterback. I have Cam Akers and Joe Mixon and Le'Veon Bell as running backs. Then I have Robert Woods, Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas, DK Metcalf, and then Hunter Henry in the tight end premium league. So my starting roster is pretty stacked. I am a little bit shallow on the depth side of things, but I do think that I will be competitive. As far as my worst team goes, I don't even really know the settings in this league. It's called Trade the Public. Shout out Justin. He's always in the comments writing something. It's just my worst team, mostly because I have Kirk Cousins and Tyrod Taylor as my only quarterbacks, and it's a league where you can start 3 quarterbacks. So it's going to be a tough look for me, but I do have, my skill positions are pretty solid. I have Kareem Hunt, Jonathan Taylor, Thielen, Diggs, Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, Odell, Aaron Jones, Deebo Samuel. I did have Jameis Winston. That's kind of tough to see him as a backup now. I have Keyshawn Vaughn, Ronald Jones, N'Keal Harry, fucking Titty Higgins. If you have Titty Higgins on your team, that's your worst team. So that's where I'm looking, Mike. I hopefully can take a few championships home this year. How you looking for the 2020 season?
I mean, I tweeted this out and Noah can throw it up on screen later, but in the 2019 to 2020 season, I always tweet out my report card so people know, if I'm a shitty dynasty player, then don't follow my advice. I think I was in 18 total leagues last year. 5 of them were redraft / keeper. I made playoffs in all 5 and got 2 buys, and I think I won 2 championships there. In the dynasty leagues where I was like actually trying to compete, there was 6 of them. I made playoffs in 5 of them, so I missed it in 1. And I got 1 bye, and I think I won 3 dynasty championships last year. And then I have about 7 rebuilds and orphans that I took over. So all 7 of them, none in the playoffs because I'm tanking on purpose, or like I literally took them over and they're total fucking dumpsters. So hopefully I can turn those around within next 2 to 3 years. So yeah, that's kind of like my overall. I think now this year I'm in about 23 dynasty leagues total. I'll be taking part in 2 redrafts. So my best team is not one that I've won. And this is where I said like playoffs is a lot about luck, but I'll give you a sense for what my team is. I come second now. I think this is my 3rd year in the league, I believe. And I came second in both year 1 and year 2.
Like the Buffalo Bills.
Kind of painful. Yeah. So I'm hopefully I don't go 4 for 4 second places, but we'll see what happens. I got Patrick Mahomes. Oh, this is a super flex 12 team half PPR. I got Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Gardner Minshew, Drew Brees at quarterback, as well as Andrew Luck. Shout out to my boy. Hope you come back, homie. And then I got Lim Bowden, James Conner, Dalvin Cook, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders at running back. So a lot of good depth there. I made like a big trade where I sold off DeAndre Hopkins to Keenan Allen to get some more depth. At wide receiver, I got Bryan Edwards, Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, Rashad Perriman, and Robert Woods and Preston Williams. So again, some pretty decent depth there. And then at tight end, I got Evan Ingram, George Kittle, and a couple other depths. So that's probably my best team, I would say. But like I said, I came in second both years. But the one that I think is probably more interesting is the BDGE inaugural Dynasty League. I think my team in that one's pretty stacked. I went back to back, trying to go for a 3rd repeat, but I got Daniel Jones, quarterback, with Big Ben and Jameis Winston and Gardner Minshew on the bench. The single quarterback. Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews, Amari Cooper, Todd Gurley, and then I got Damian Williams, Boston Scott, Curtis Samuel, and then TJ Hawkinson, a couple other guys right on the bench. So I'd say those are a couple of my strongest teams. So there you have it.
That's a very dangerous team, Mike. This was a dangerous hour and a half long of recording. I don't know why I wore a long sleeve shirt. I'm on the brink of just sweating like crazy. But this is this week's. Actually, no, this is the Q&A. I was about to say this week's narrative. So this is coming out Tuesday. You guys, tomorrow will see the Bunkbed breakdown segment. Thursday is the narrative where we talk about more implications of COVID and whether or not you should fade running backs. Friday, we got 5 Fact Fridays. And then after the weekend, you'll have Mike's Market Watch Monday. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you want to be featured in, not next week, but the week after, we do this bi-weekly. If you want to be featured in the next Bunk Bed Breakdowns Q&A, hit up our Discord. You can join through the Patreon, which will probably be linked in the description. I think it's $9.99 a month, which is, I think it's a good value because you get to be featured in this type of stuff. You get to join Dynasty Startup Leagues. Nick gives you private live streams where you can go and get redraft type of advice if that's what you're looking for. There's just a whole bunch of value. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. Subscribe if you're new. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Have a great day. Peace.